Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spiritually Unfiltered with Abby and Seema. Today's episode is very exciting because it's going to be all about Abby's story. We decided that we want to do episodes on each of us so you guys can really get to know us better and our journey and our intentions with our work so much better. So, we're going to start off with Abby's episode. So, today is going to be all about Abby, her journey, her intentions, and all that good stuff. So, hi, Abby.
Hello. It's so exciting. I think this is really exciting. It feels like so stretchy for me to talk about my story, but
Mhm.
I think it's part of what I do. So,
Yeah.
here we go.
Now, when we first spoke about this, you said you were a little bit nervous to share certain things about it. What was it that made you so nervous to share? And are you over that little fear?
Mm. Do you know what? I actually think this is kind of like an old fear that I used to have, and so I'm actually really like right now, I'm not nervous about sharing anything. I think I think stories actually bring people together. Stories are where we really do understand and receive so much wisdom, so much of my message is always through how I tell my stories.
Yeah.
And I think the sort of old programming for me is, and this is a question I get a lot as well, is when you're in this sort of coaching space, sometimes you do have that feeling of, I need to show up as done, as perfect, as all of these things. And actually, that has been a process for me in itself as well, and understanding that there's no such thing as perfection, and where we are is perfect for the people that we are going to serve, and just really owning that. That's part of embodying the lessons that you move through as well.
Absolutely. I've learned something along this journey, and that is to be the best coach and to be the best leader, I get to be very vulnerable about where I am as well.
Mm.
And it's not about sharing my mess, it's about sharing the message and being a reflection of where our journeys kind of take us and what we experience. And none of us are ever perfect, and our journeys are perfect because they were imperfect. And
Mm.
so we want to share today with our audience how you got to be here at the space of being a coach and evolving in this way. And I know that you and I spoke a lot about your intentions of where you want to see all of this going. And it's so deeply connected to your journey and what got you started with all of this. And so take us from the beginning of the thing that happened with your family, and then you decided to like move away for like 5 years where you were traveling. Go.
Yeah, I know, but gosh, it's like it feels like a lifetime ago because I mean, it kind of was. It was like 15, 16 years ago. But in around like 2008, just to give some context, I kind of growing up, I my dad was always about giving us the life that he never had. And, so he grew up in like a big family, and they didn't have much. They had a lot of love, is what my dad always says. But, in terms of like financial security and money, like they didn't have all of those things. And so this was something I knew from a very young age. And so, with that in itself, I did create this respect to money. And, my dad really ingrained this into us. And so growing up, my mom and dad, they were like self-made, and, they come such a long way. And really, like, I've been reflecting on it the last few days, and I'm like, them themselves broke generational patterns, they evolved so much in their own lives. And so growing up, I kind of had, everything that I wanted, I didn't have to sort of, you know, it just, I could ask for what I needed and what I wanted, and there was never this worry about, can we afford it, or is the money going to be there? It was just this abundance, really. And in 2008, I remember I was the only one living at home at the time. I was 18, and my dad was sitting at like the kitchen table, and I could just sense that something was up. And I said, "What's going on?" And I just remember vividly my dad saying, "I'm worried we're going to lose everything, everything that they'd worked for." Because in 2008 was the big, financial crash.
Mhm.
And so from that point, obviously at that time, I was 18, I was about to go traveling with my friend. I was about to, sort of step into adulthood. And all of a sudden, I was met with like this challenge. And honestly, like I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't know what to think. I didn't know how to behave, like nothing. And I mean, we kind of, I guess we helped where we could. My oldest brother, he's 10 years older than me, so he did a lot more than, me and my other brother. But really, like, I can't remember exactly what I did from that moment, but this was the point that I just went traveling. I put on a backpack and I just entered into this traveling era that I had. And I think, when I reflect on it now, that was, I mean, it was kind of running away. I was running
Right.
away from, any problems or anything. Like I didn't want to deal with it. Like I didn't. And so, yeah, so I went and I literally, I mean, for about 5 years, and it's quite interesting because obviously the wound that I developed in that particular circumstance and situation in my life is abandonment when it comes to money. That it's kind of like money's always going to leave. It wasn't this abundant mindset that I've now created where it's like, you spend money, you get more back. It's like money is fluid, it's supposed to be circulating. But at that point, it was just like money is being taken away. Money is abandoning our family. And that was sort of the wound that really, what I then went on to do is, you know, as I was traveling, it was just, I was in this rinse and repeat cycle where I would go traveling, I would spend all of my money, I would be like at zero, and then I would fly home or I would grab work somewhere along the way and I would build up my account again and then I'd spend it all again. And I was in this like pattern of, like having cashing up and then back to zero, cashing up and back to zero.
Well, you were creating that reality that money abandons you. Money comes and then it
Exactly.
abandons you. Money comes and it
Exactly.
abandons you. So
Exactly.
tell me a little bit about those like 5 years that you were traveling a lot. What
Mm.
version of Abby did you experience then? Because I think so
Yeah.
many people see you now and they see this like grounded, mature, responsible woman. And I think there was a very different version of you then that
Oh
people
my
don't
gosh.
really, they don't think she existed. And I think it's also important to share that aspect.
Yeah. I mean, my early 20s were wild. Like I was literally just we called our like I mean, we kind of called it, the way people say like, "Oh, like go backpacking." We called it party packing because we would just go from, we'd travel to Thailand, there was kind of like a circuit in Southeast Asia, and
Hmm.
at the time when I was like in my early 20s, there were all these kind of towns that everybody would hit up. And what kind of happened is I got to know, like, sort of like the regular people every winter, or 6 months out of the year. Everybody would be doing the same pattern as me, where we
Hmm.
cashed up and then for the winter we're going traveling for 6 months, and we
You're
would
going
just
partying, not traveling.
party. We would just party. And it was it's kind of interesting because, of course, like when I look back on that time for me from where I am now, I kind of I don't really drink now or anything, and I just think that is so far from who I am now. and I couldn't do those things ever again. But at the same time, I am nothing but grateful because actually, those times, I mean, I think obviously I was creating a lot of patterns and a lot of really sort of reaffirming a wound that I developed. But I also think that's part of the process sometimes that we have to go through in order to forge something out of that, right? But also, I met some of my very best friends in those years. You know, I would not be in Sweden now if it wasn't for those times, because I met two Swedes on the beach. One of them I was just with today, and it's like we've
Mhm.
been friends ever since. And they were the ones that got me to come here as well. So,
I think there's a really beautiful lesson in this. And I think a lot of people, as they're just living life, they get so, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do? And they're trying to think of like an outcome of what's going to happen, even though they're called to
mm,
doing something. Like you were just called to run away from that financial problem and go do this thing that young people in Europe do and travel and party and have a good time. And it's like it gave you so much more than you could ever anticipate. Like you never thought that that journey would then lead you to what you're doing today in human design and living in Sweden and having these best friends. And so it's such a reminder to people that as you just live your life and just go through the journey, it literally gives you so much more than you could ever even imagine. And there's people you're going to meet along the way that you never even thought you needed to meet. And then they
exactly.
become these lifelong friends of yours. And one thing I love about this part of your journey that you told me is I remember when I first met you, I also thought Abby is just this really like nice, sweet, quiet girl who is like a, for lack of better words, like goody two shoe. And I just thought like
Yeah.
you were just like so good. And then I remember when we were in Joshua Tree, you all of a sudden start like rapping this Nicki Minaj song like all the way through. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, this girl has a past. Like, where did that come from? And it was so like refreshing to see. And it's just such a reminder that we see all these like different like spiritual coaches in this space. And it's
Mm.
like, we're all just regular people that did all of like the teenage young adult things, and it's so fun to
Yeah,
see that you had that season of your life, and it was such a good season. It's such an important season, and it gave you so much of what you have today and who you are today. So
mm.
tell us now, after those 5 years of this back and forth and all of that, I know you met someone through there and then you had a relationship that then took you to a different country.
Yeah, so this is where I think it's kind of like divine intervention because I could have kept going down that road, like honestly. And also, I want to say when you said, like that I'm like sweet and like this like goody two shoes, actually, when I was traveling, the first group of people that I met, they nicknamed me Lovely Liverpool. Like that was my nickname. So it was that. But
I love that.
yeah, it's so funny. But but yeah, so then I was in this place called Laos, and it's a country that is north of Thailand. And a lot of people go there they have this thing called tubing. And so basically, it's like a bar crawl, but you get to each bar from a
Hmm.
tube along the river.
How fun.
And it was very fun, but it was like this hedonistic place where my brother used to say that people went there to forget about life. He said people would go there because they couldn't cope with life. That was his, and I would be, at the time I was like, no, that's not true. But kind of when I think about it now, it's a little bit true, and because you would go there and there was so many groups of us that would go there and meet up, and you would get a job in one of the bars, and you wouldn't get paid, but they would pay for your accommodation, they would pay for your food, and you could drink as much as you wanted. And
Mhm.
so it was just like this recipe for you staying there because they were giving you all the things that you wanted. And in a sense, when you think about that, in that space, I was abandoning money because I didn't need it, right? I had everything I needed right there. And so when I was there, I met a guy from Finland. And it was, we were in this place and he was working in one bar, I was working in another. And very, very quickly, like we fell in love. And it was just this journey. Like my plans completely got thrown out the window. I was gonna go to, I think, New Zealand to work or something with my friend. And it became about this person. And I ended up moving to Finland. And I spent about, long story short on that one, but like I spent about a year in Finland and then we broke up and I went back to England and I was sort of at this, it's kind of like a dichotomy, like I'm at like this
Mm-hmm.
space of it's like this fork in the road. It's like where do I go? So because I remember like when I met him and we'd, been living together and we created this life in Finland, I kind of liked it. I kind of liked that feeling of having a home somewhere and being somewhere and not being in this rinse and repeat. I remember it felt like quite settling to me. And so I went back to England and it was okay, I can either go back to Laos, I can go back to this country. I've got friends that are still there. They're still partying, they're still doing the same thing. There's space for me. Or my brother was saying to me, come to China, come to China.
Mm-hmm.
China is, you can get a job here, you can live with us. His daughter was going to be born in a few months, and he was just like, come here. But I was like, in my head, I was like, no, I know what I'm doing, but I just don't know. I just kept putting it off, right? And and then one day, this was, I told you the other day, this was like the first time I ever had like an intuitive hit. I it just like literally it was like an arrow like was shot at me
Mm-hmm.
and this clarity just came over me and I just said, I'm going to China. I've decided I'm going to China. And
Mm-hmm.
this is honestly where my life completely changed, where I mean, China taught me so much and it woke me up so much to
Yeah.
more of who I am, you know?
One thing I am absolutely loving about hearing this is all of the places you have traveled to across Europe and just in that whole experience, because I think as Americans, we don't travel as much as you guys do there. And so having those experiences are not something as familiar to us. But I think one thing that that actually really did for you is going from like city to city, from country to country. It like expanded your vessel of experiences. And one thing that you do so easily is you allow yourself to have new experiences and different experiences, and you're not afraid to have different experiences. And I think all of that travel kind of created those like frequency codes for you of new experiences are good, new experiences are expansive. And you've just had so many from traveling so much and being to so many different places that like moving to China didn't feel scary for you. You're like, okay, new experience and like this feels great and this feels wonderful. And I think that having experiences like that, whether it comes through travel or just from giving ourselves space to have new experiences and seeing it as like a fun and good thing, really expands so much for us. And so you gave yourself permission to listen to this intuitive hit, and you got up, you packed your stuff, you moved to China, all while still carrying these like money wounds. Money's gonna abandon me, so on and so forth. Tell us what happened in China.
Yeah, I mean, what I also do want to say is these money wounds, so that relationship that I had, this is
Hmm.
why I always say I think it's important. Money is like a partner to you, and money, it is a very Venusian energy, the same as partnership, the same as relationships. And so, actually, the wounds that you have with money, they actually show up in relationships as well. And so, that fear of abandonment when it came to money, that fear that I was in that rinse and repeat with, where I thought money was going to abandon me, so I would just abandon money, right?
Hmm.
That cycle that I was in, that started showing up in that relationship. That was my first important relationship. And I was always scared that he was going to abandon me. That was what would always come up in that experience for me.
Hmm.
And so I went to China, and China literally, I was very delicate when I went to China. I just had my heart broken, and I was, really in this phase of healing. And China just like wrapped her arms around me and just like welcomed me in so much. And I was saying to you the other day, that's sometimes I get offended if people say bad things about China, because I'm like, have you been? Like, have
Yeah.
you experienced what China is all about?
I think it's so easy for people to talk bad about countries or people where they've never been to that country and it's all
Exactly.
an assumption.
Mm.
And so tell us more about what
Yeah.
China gave to you.
So I arrived in China, and of course, like my brother was there. His wife is Chinese. She was pregnant, and it was just like this whole, being there for that experience as well, for, watching my niece come into the world and my
Mhm.
nephew as well, because I lived in China for 4 years. But when I got there, it was honestly, I just felt like I was getting job offers left, right, and center. I remember there was this course of a week, and I went for like 7 interviews, and I taught some classes like at this center on the weekend. And I was just like, money was just like falling into my lap. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I've never really experienced this before. And then and then I went to a party with my brother, and a girl that he knew there, someone she knew, like a parent from her class, had been asking her, do you know anyone that can come and be a tutor to and homeschool one of my kids at home, one of my younger kids? And she was very specific on what she wanted. She wanted a female, and she wanted them to be British. And
Perfect.
perfect. So I showed up to this party. They didn't even know I was coming to this party. I came as my brother's guest, and she was like, light bulb moment, connected the dots. And what happened was she just introduced me to this woman in this family. And, this family, they are very wealthy, let's say. They are high net worth individuals, and they have 4 children, and they wanted me to come in and basically create like a school at home for their kids, and you know come every morning and pick up their daughter, who was around 3.5 at the time. And they just initially, I was only going to work for them for 6 months, but I ended up working with them for a very long time. They're still, I don't work for them anymore, but they've been in my life for 9 years now, and I've watched their kids grow. And it's but just even that experience coming into my life was, it's part of this thread that we're
Mhm.
talking about these
Mhm.
experiences with money.
Yep.
Because this family, because they are these high net worth individuals, they taught me so much about money, and I was so welcomed into their fold. I'm part of their family,
Yeah.
essentially. And yeah, they taught me, so China in general taught me a lot about wealth and about abundance and abundant thinking. And one thing that people do in China, and I think this is such a helpful piece of wisdom for people to understand when it comes to money, because you know a lot of people have these wounds when it comes to money. I hear it all the time.
Mhm.
And I just don't think we should have them. We don't have to have them. We
Right.
get to evolve and expand out of these things that hold us back, these beliefs or these narratives. And in China, they think of everything with longevity in mind. So when it comes to investments or when it comes to spending money or anything, they think of it as generationally. So they're always like, will this be, they want to grow their wealth over
Is it going to be good for the
generations.
future? Right.
Yeah, so they're thinking of everything really long term. And I think in the West, we think a lot in short term, like,
Temporary, yeah.
yeah. And it's kind of like, things like quick cash and things like this. We were speaking about this in the last podcast episode about, being in that competition, that competitive mindset when it comes to your business, for example, or how you're showing up online. You've got to play the long game. It's
Right.
all about, if you want to have sustained wealth and you want to grow wealth, it's not about quick fixes, it's not about quick cash, it's about building.
Yeah.
And
And you
this
want to
was
have a really strong foundation for it.
exactly. And so this whole experience, this was, I mean, they've been in my life for 9 years. I think in total, I've probably worked for them for about six. And they taught me so much about wealth and so much about being worthy of receiving it as
Yeah.
well. And that has been such a I think I also want to say when it comes to wealth and when it comes my own relationship with money, it's always evolving. It's something I always have to keep in check, if you like, because yeah, like I do like I have those wounds,
Yeah.
and I've healed
Well,
them a lot.
I'll say you had those
Had
wounds. I think what I'm picking up from what you're saying, especially because I know that all of this is leading to this wealth mindset and this purpose around supporting others with money as well. It's
Mm.
sometimes we don't realize when we're going down a path God is really meeting us there. And when you left home and you left that whole financial crisis that your family was going through and you didn't want to have that, you took a burden of that. And you took that burden and you experienced that burden. And you experienced the narrative you created through that, which was money's going to abandon me. So then money kept abandoning you. And then you started working somewhere where you got no money. So then money couldn't abandon you because money wasn't involved in it. You were just working there and living there, and that was that. And so then when you chose to go to China, because we have free will, and you chose to go there, God is like, okay, we are going to support her in rewriting her experience with money. She got to experience her life if she had her father or mother's narrative. And now we're going to start giving her her own experience. And it sounds like this family that kind of just fell on your lap because you just
Absolutely.
showed up and you followed what felt right for you. This
Hmm.
family became the start of you building your own narrative and your own experience around money. And it started to shift you out of your parents' mindset around money and their lack around money or whatever that came from to having your own. And I think that's so beautiful to see because I don't think you ever expected this to happen this way, but when you look back, you're like, wow, that's when my own narrative around money started to be built, to have a healthy relationship with money, to have a beautiful relationship with money, to see that I'm welcomed to it and I get to experience it and I get to be around it. And one thing I always tell people when they talk about money, I'm like, you have to go be comfortable around being with money. Some people want money, but they don't feel energetically aligned with having more money. They feel like they don't belong with money. And so you got to be around financial abundance. You got to experience it. You got to be very welcomed into it. And I think that was really the start of it shifting your energetic foundation with you and money because it started to build your own narrative and your own experience around it.
Exactly. And again, it's, a lot of people, they can not put themselves in certain environments because it's like, I can't afford to be here, or why would I be here? It's this kind of narrative, and that's something I say to people, like exposure therapy, like go and let yourself be in
Yeah.
these places and allow yourself to experience like the codes that live there. But I was taken to those places. I was taken into private rooms in a restaurant to, the best hotels in the world. Like I was taken to all of these places, and I was just really and I was made to feel welcome in these
Yes.
places. And
Yes.
so and it's so true because it creates this thread. And when we were discussing this episode a few days ago, it was like almost understanding, oh my God, this is why this has always been coming together behind the scenes
Mhm.
for me.
Yeah.
But when I was really confronted with this reality, because, and this is very true for a lot of us, is these things, these narratives, these beliefs that we have, they're playing in the background, and sometimes we don't even realize that they're consciously there. And
Yeah.
so during these times, I had no idea. I had no idea that I was abandoning money or I had any issues with money. Those things would happen, where I wouldn't want to buy something because I wouldn't want to spend money. That would happen, but I didn't consciously connect why I was having that feeling.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I started my own business that these wounds were really given the air. They were really allowed to come to the surface, and this is where I had to actually confront them and start choosing differently. And
Mhm.
so this is why I always say to people, if you want to have an awakening, start a business.
Our business. Yeah.
Because literally, like, all your shadows come to the surface, especially when
Every
you're,
every
yeah.
shadow around money, every shadow around self-worth, around
Mm,
your confidence, around speaking your truth, every shadow comes up when you want to start a business. And I think what's interesting is a lot of people like you and I, we never really had an intention of starting a business. It kind of just happened.
yeah, it
So
did.
tell us how your business with human design, where did that even come from? How did it start?
Oh. Oh, this is so nice. So I'm still in China. I'm still in China, and I went to a Reiki session. So this was like, I was always kind of into spirituality. Like when I was a kid, I would, read my horoscope, and I would have like a book about being an Aries, like things like that. I was always really intrigued by. And but I'd never really stepped into the spiritual world. And one of my friends in China, she went for a Reiki session and told me about it, and I was like, "Oh my God, I have to go. Let me go try it." And so I went to this session and we did the Reiki, and afterwards she like had a chat with me, and she said to me, "Have you heard of human design?" And I was like, no, like, what's that? And, she proceeded to like pull up my chart and tell me a little bit about it. And what's really interesting is it didn't like hook me in right then and there. It was something I kind of went away, I kind of thought about it, but it was the second time I went back, she brought it up again. And it was just like all of a sudden, I was like, hooked. I was like, I want to know more. I need to know more.
Mhm.
I feel like I need to know what this is about. And what's interesting about that is I kind of laugh to myself about it because I'm an emotional authority in human design. So I actually need time before I make decisions. And it was kind of like subconsciously, I'd given myself that time to really respond to human design. And so when I did like respond to it, I was
Mhm.
all in. It was like so I got a mentor, and she was in my pocket. And I, was using human design to understand different things that were going on in my life, and really just letting it support me. And then I got the full textbook. I had like a friend, bring it in over the border from Hong Kong, and it was like a whole thing. I was like engulfed in understanding about human design because I'd never had someone tell me who I was on a deeper level in my life. Like I had never experienced someone telling me things about myself that I had never even spoken aloud.
But you just
And
felt it all along.
I felt it. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like, she was saying these things to me, and I was like, it was like hitting my soul, and and of course, like when I do sessions myself, this is exactly it's so beautiful to me because I see that same spark. It's like the light goes on in my
Mm-hmm.
client's eyes, and I'm like, I know what that light felt like. It just like something switched on in me.
Mm-hmm.
And, although at the time I was relatively happy in China, but I was just honestly, I was just like kind of coasting. I wasn't, I was, I'm an Aries as well. Like I'm super like ambitious. I've always
Right.
been very ambitious and a go-getter and, always been these things. But I kind of become quite complacent. In China, I was just kind of like drifting along. And this came to me, and it was all of a sudden like I remembered that I am the creator and I get to choose what I do, where I do it, like where I go. I get to be that creator. And so
How long after you went to China did human design enter the picture?
it was literally, I think it was 3 years after.
Okay.
So I
You
had
had some
about
time there.
I had some, yeah. So it was only about a year, like I spent like maybe a year or so more.
Hmm.
And I mean, COVID happened as well. I mean, this is all divine timing because I found human design, and this was the year before. And then I think towards the end of that year, I took a course on human design. And then that beginning of that following year was COVID. And obviously COVID started in China, and I was locked out. So I was in Bali, the family were in Australia. They were like, we're gonna stay here, ride this out until, until it dies down. Do you want to come fly and meet us here? And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't need to go back. And so they flew me to Australia, and we ended up getting, locked in Australia. And this was when I moved from China because I never went back until, recently, really, after COVID.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
This was crazy. It was, and this is also because I felt like the universe was pushing me into this thing, human design, that you found and you're excited by. And I started sort of feeling this calling to wanting to share it and wanting to tell
Hmm.
people about it. And people started coming to me and saying, oh, can I have a session? So during that period of being in Australia, I started doing sessions. And I was like, you know what? I can do this. I know in my heart I've always wanted to move back to Sweden, so I'm gonna do it. And so after I think I spent like 9 months in Australia with the family, and then I flew to Sweden, and that was let's get going, let's start my business.
Hmm.
And this is when I was, greeted with all of these stories that I didn't know I had.
So you start your business, and what are the number one stories? Because I feel like when we decide to start a business, there's all this excitement, there's all this hype, and we have all these visions of where it can go and how big it can get, and we're excited. And then we think we're going to start this business and it's just going to be good. But then it's like you start something and then the lessons start right there too.
Right
And so
there.
you start this business, and what are the lessons that start coming up for you?
Honestly, I guess I was kind of a little bit naive, like going into this, but also I think
Mhm.
that's where we learn a lot,
Yeah.
and I
There's
wouldn't have
nothing
done it
wrong with
another way.
being naive. I
No.
think when we step into something new, we're always a little bit naive, and we don't realize we're being naive until the thing unfolds and we're like, oh, I really had no idea.
Yeah.
But I think that's very normal.
Yeah, maybe it's a good thing actually because it kind of made
Yeah.
me a little bit delusional,
I
but
mean,
I
yeah, if
think
you know all the things going into it, that would kind of halt people from starting these things.
yeah, then you get
So,
in your head about it
hmm
and talk yourself out of it, but I just went for it and but the funny thing was I thought it was going to be an overnight success. I thought, I'm going to start this and I'm just gonna have a full salary from tomorrow. I don't know. Like I didn't think that through. Like I didn't think about that. I didn't think where am I getting the clients from? Like of course I'd worked with a few people here and there, but it it wasn't like enough yet, you know? And so that really started that sort of journey. And, of course, like each day it got better and, each month it got better. But there came a point because I was in Sweden at this point, and there came a point when honestly I nearly threw in the towel. I was just like, this is too heavy for me because I am putting my all into everything that I'm doing, and it's not working in the way that I wanted it to. And, it's this sort of idea of I still have bills to pay. I still have to make a living. And right now, like I'm not there yet. And, I think also, and this is something I've learned over the years after that is, you know, obviously just creating a trust with money. I had to like repair the trust that I'd lost with money all those years ago, and this is so what I did at this point is I decided to go home. I decided to repeat that pattern that I'd always had, that I'd done throughout traveling where I'd gone and but this time it was the traveling was trying to start a life somewhere and trying to set up a business, and I went back home just so I could sort of feel some solid ground. But what I would say is that actually allowed me to take the pressure off a little bit, and that is when my business just started going like this you
tell me
know
more about that. Tell me more about what was it being home that took the pressure off? Because whenever we want to grow in any aspect of life and we're putting so much pressure on it, we're restricting it from growing. This is why we also kind of say, like, when you want something, give it to God because it's taking the pressure off of you, and then
Mm.
you allow yourself to receive the thing that you want. So, what was it about going back home that lifted this pressure off of you?
I think it was, of course, like what happened was I minimized the money I had going out. And for me, that was the sort of logical thing to do. But I remember I was leaving Sweden and I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to leave. Like I want to stay. But now I've made this decision and, okay, like let's do it because something's not working. But
Mhm.
but that moving back in with my mom and dad, it did take that pressure off and it allowed me to feel like, okay, I can let me just like sort of regroup It was like a regrouping. Like, what am I going to do? Is this going to work? Let
Yeah.
me, sort of like create the plan. And yeah, like it did. It took the pressure off. But, I was repeating that cycle again of, sort of, yeah, just toing and froing with money, rinse and repeat. And, but it took that pressure off. And all of a sudden, it was like all of a sudden I was letting myself be seen from a place of passion and not a place of I need to make money.
Yeah, it wasn't from survival anymore.
No, it was from it came from passion again, and that for me, and I think as well when it comes to business, that is sort of what we have to create,
Mhm.
is to not come from this place of survival. Like I mean, and I've had to catch myself over the years of
Yeah,
not coming
because
from that
sometimes
place.
it comes back. That feeling
Yeah.
of like, I need to survive, it kind of sneaks back in, and you have to catch yourself and be like, we can't create abundance from this space because it doesn't flow. That energy restricts.
Exactly.
And so you go back to London because you feel, or England because you feel called to go back there, and you live with your parents, and it's taking away this pressure of
Mhm.
rent and stuff. So it's allowing your business to kind of take off more and
Mhm.
flow. Tell me how then, like, Danny entered the picture with you, because I know that that was one of the parts of your business. Like, you had already built something for yourself, and that came in to really, and it really helped expand your
Mhm.
business and therefore expand you as an individual as well.
Yeah. So actually, Danny came in before I left Sweden.
Oh, okay.
So he came into, and this was when I first experienced what this business could do and how
Hmm.
it could help and how it could serve. And my message was being heard in the right rooms. And it just like, this was when I felt like this can work. But it kind of like, I didn't know what to do with that as well at the same time. And this
Hmm.
was, so this was maybe a few months before. And, at that point, then Danny would send me clients here and there and whatever. Um, but yeah, I was still kind of, I got to this point 6 months later. This was maybe 6 months after, first meeting Danny. This is
Hmm.
before, Awaken You and all of these other
Hmm.
collaborations we've done. And yeah, like I went back to England and I was like, okay, let's take the pressure off. And this is when I just created. I was just in this creator mode.
Hmm.
And it was really beautiful actually to experience that with my parents because they watched me from when I came home and being like, maybe I
Yeah.
should do something else to they would like, oh, what happened overnight? That was like the morning coffee chat, and it would be like, oh, I got like two bookings for a session last night. I got two people ordered this, or I got 1,000 more followers on Instagram, and it was when I was in England that I went to Awaken. I went to Austin,
Uh-huh.
and that was really like a really big kickstart in that as well. That was when I met Danny. That's when I met so many of the clients that he'd already sent my way. And that's when things just really started accelerating.
Hmm.
And yeah, this was this point. But what happened was, and this is I think this is an interesting part of the story because I then wanted to go to see my family in China and also, the family that I used to work for. It was, post COVID, and I decided I wanted to go there. And I get to Hong Kong, and like the family, they're so happy to see me. And, I stayed in one of their homes, and it was a beautiful time. I was there for a couple of weeks before I went over to the mainland. And they wanted me to stay in Hong Kong. They wanted to have me back. They, I think they just they've always just loved my energy around their
Mm-hmm.
family,
Mm-hmm.
and which feels like so beautiful, that they just like to be around me.
Yeah.
And so, I went to China, I came back, and my business was doing really well at this point, and it was just going up and up. But they made me an offer I couldn't refuse at the time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if it was to come to me now after all the work that I've done around money and around those wounds, I probably would have said no. But at that point, it was just like, how could I say no? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And so I said yes. And what then happened was I was in this balancing act then of having two jobs. I had this full-time job in Hong Kong, and I had a full-time business as well. And it was just, and I think, in a way, like sometimes I felt quite bad because I was like, have I accepted this because I lack trust in that longevity of my vision of my
Mm-hmm.
business? And, I'm just like sort of, I don't know, but really, I know this was needed because this whole portion of my story is when I really started to notice the narratives that I had around money. I had a full-time business and a full-time job, and then I started noticing that I talked myself out of buying stuff. And I was thinking, why would I have money? Like why don't I want to buy this for myself? Or why am
Yeah.
I having these second thoughts? And why aren't I trusting that money is fluid? It is in circulation all the time. Why aren't I trusting these things? And so I think it was that experience in itself to, attracting a lot of money into my field. It helped. It actually, it's funny because we think it's the other way more so, right? That like
Right.
which happens also when you have a dip. But this sort of, this acceleration of how much money I had in my pocket, and I just wanted to get rid of it, you know? It was this like, and I didn't even realize that I was doing that, but now I think
Mm-hmm.
back to it and it's just kind of like there were moments where I would either so worried about spending or I
Or
just
you would
want to spend it,
overspend.
or I would
So
overspend.
one extreme to the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So tell me now, with moving through all of this and getting to this place now, because obviously you have left that family in Hong Kong and you stopped working for them. You had a whole experience in Bali, which I know we've spoken about in other podcasts too, and like that helped you evolve in so many ways and it brought you home to your feminine in a lot of beautiful ways. And then you felt this calling and you went back to Sweden, which is where you are now. And you're really dedicated to your work and building this and evolving this. So tell me now, at this place, what is your, looking back and seeing the whole story and seeing how God had actually like lined up so many things for you, even down to you and I
Yeah.
meeting each other and then like being here together. What is your biggest intention in your work and like the biggest message you want to give your clients and the people who hear you and the people who come across your path? What is your message for them?
Hmm. Like I think because what I did when I noticed, when I finally caught on to, okay, I am not having a great relationship with money right now and with
Mhm.
abundance, and it's even showed up in my time, like
Mhm.
that I spread myself so thin when I was in Hong Kong and I was working 6 days a week for the family, 7 days a week in my business. I spread myself so thin and that didn't feel abundant, right?
Yeah.
And I really, I invested in myself a lot at this point. I worked with, coaches and, I've read a lot of books that are, really related to mindset and to money and to really rewiring these stories that we have. And I think honestly, like a part of me thinks that for me, I know I have had these stories, but so many people do. So many people have stories when it comes to money.
Yeah.
And I have realized over the last couple of years that, money is like a partner, it's like an equal in your life. It is not something that you're here to worship or something that you're here to run from. It is an equal in your life. And I even think, something I've always said about the family, for example, that I worked with, is I always had a seat at their table. Like I always, it was, wherever we went, it was like I had, my own set of plates. Like it was in the kitchen. This is Abby's set of plates. Like Abby has a seat at our table. And I think when it comes to wealth, when it comes to money, it's this equality that we have to connect with. Like we're on the same level as money, like all of us, and you're here to live an abundant life. Everybody is here to create their most abundant life, to be the most abundant version of themselves. And I think a lot of that, it does start with our relationship with ourselves, I think, and I think this is why I've done the work through human design, because I know that awareness, it's going to get us to the next point and the next point. It
Yes.
opens up this box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to see yourself on a deeper level. But I just have this, I know that we are supposed to have our most abundant life, and whatever that looks like to you. We're
Yeah.
supposed to feel wealthy in our life. And,
Yeah.
for some people, I mean, for some people, it could be, people will say, like, oh, yeah, but I want to feel wealthy in my time and things like that. And I'm like, you can, like, be okay with saying, I want to be wealthy in my money as well. Like, I want to be
Mm-hmm.
rich, financially wealthy.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just, I think for me, because money, it gives you freedom, and,
Yeah.
so for,
Freedom is the most important thing
you know,
in this realm and in this journey,
mm,
like having freedom in all of these different ways. But money is freedom. It gives you the freedom to experience life. It gives you the freedom to evolve.
yeah.
Because just like you said, going into your parents' home, it lifted this burden. So then you were able to evolve. Money does that in our experience. It lifts this
Mm,
burden. And so then when we have money to afford the experiences that we want, from where we want to live, how we want to eat, how we just want to experience life, and traveling, that actually gives us permission to
mm,
expand and evolve. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to have experiences and therefore to evolve. It's for our souls. And money is so important in that aspect. And I love hearing about your journey and seeing that although you started with human design reflected to you something that you're so deeply passionate about, and it's about financial abundance and
mm,
financial freedom, and how that's becoming your next level of what you are actively evolving through. And we
mm,
always say, as a good coach, you always get to go first.
yeah.
And so it's something that you have gone first in and you're continuing to grow through. And it's going to
Mm,
be a part of the next level of things that you offer to people, is
yeah.
this money mindset and money mastery and
Mm,
abundance in those ways, and the importance of it. And I've seen this in myself, so I love seeing it in other people. It's when you start your business, you think you're starting it with this one thing,
mm,
and then it just grows and it evolves, and the things you want to give people just really grows, and it's for yourself too, and it's for your own growth. And so this next level of Abby is about financial abundance and
yeah.
prosperity, dancing with money and enjoying life with money, and
Yeah.
whatever narratives that come with it. I feel so many people associate money with being like bad, or money is evil, and if you have money then you're a bad person. There's all of these narratives that
Mm,
I think we really get to talk to people about, and I know
exactly.
it's something you and I spoke about, and there will be more added to it after they hear my episode of my story. But it's gonna be the
Mm.
coaching classes and seminars that we're going to hold for people around these things that are so special and important to
Yeah.
us, and money being one of them for you.
Yeah, and I think as well because, I see and I meet a lot of people in my life that do have these wounds around money, and it's something, obviously with what my parents went through, I've seen their wounds come to the surface, and I just think because for me, I've worked so much on my own wounds and my own relationship to money. And right now, I feel so free in my relationship that I've created with money. I feel like I am in this partnership with money, that money always supports me, that money loves to find me. And, even if I have, like, we were having a conversation a few months ago because remember I got like my tax bill through
Hmm.
from the previous year, and it came through, and it was kind of more than I expected. And I remember saying to you, why am I celebrating a tax bill? It felt so foreign to me that I had received this five-figure tax bill, and I was like
Celebrating it.
celebrating it. And I just reflected and I thought, if this was literally a year ago, I would have been panicking. I would have been stressed and then stepping into this space of I need to make more, I need to make more because this is money abandoning me, right?
Hmm.
Like, but my whole relationship, my whole perspective, my outlook, everything has changed around money, and I feel safe with money. I feel like whenever, I sort of see it as, okay, I have this tax bill, I pay it, I'm going to receive that back tenfold. You
Yeah, I
know?
think once we become very friendly with money, we
Yeah.
start to realize whatever I have to pay, it's a gift to me that I get to, and
Hmm.
whatever I pay comes back to me tenfold. So like how exciting that I've built something that gives me a five-figure tax bill. And
Hmm.
this only means once I pay this, it only means that I'm going to expand that much more.
I
And so it's
know.
actually exciting, and it's
It
very
is.
exciting to see that.
It's
And it's so
expensive.
it is, and it's such a celebration to even be in that space, from being from the space of once upon a time not having money and running from money, and really seeing how all of these
Hmm.
experiences are changing your experience with money. And I think it's just so beautiful to see a story that started with you running away from money problems took you straight into money. And this is a part of what we see when people are breaking generational patterns. Your dad had his own story and experience around money, and he grew through that to a certain extent. And then it's like that pattern got passed to you, and now you're being given the opportunity to grow it in a completely different way and change the narrative in a completely different way, so that your abundance and your financial abundance is coming from a different foundation, which then can be very stable and grounded, and one that can be grown upon, not one that needs to come crumbling down, but one that gets to grow upon. And that's really what you've done for yourself in this journey. And it's what
Yeah.
you're continuing to do. So it's like, this is just the beginning of everything that you get to have and you get to experience, and therefore get to give to other people.
Exactly.
And I
Mm.
think it's so exciting. And it's just such a reminder to me. And I hope that it's a reminder to everyone else. Trust your journeys.
Mm.
Just trust where it's taking you, even if it makes no sense. Like, God is always putting the pieces together in all of the right ways. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Exactly.
Because
I think there's
no
always
one,
that invisible thread, and this is
yeah.
this is part of that invisible thread, that is, I mean, that whole journey. And it's funny, like I just want to say because I was watching a TV show before this, and it was about surgeons, and there was this, it really reminded me, I love it when we were about to, jump on this call, and I watched this show beforehand, and I was like, oh my God, that is someone else's invisible thread. And this guy, he was a facial reconstruction surgeon. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason that he did that was because his parents were in a car accident when he was younger, and his mother's face got disfigured, and that service that he does, that expertise, it wasn't available at that time. And that is
Wow.
like I think that is like the message, we can take these, I was talking about I had these two paths. I can go back and I can be on that rinse and repeat cycle and just be partying in Southeast Asia, or I can choose
Mm-hmm.
China and I can choose a different route. And actually, it was this route that led me and is leading me in bigger ways still to take a wound that I had, take a situation that was challenging for me and my family, and turn it into gold for others, turn it into service for the world, to give back to people, because we don't have to live in those stories. Those stories, they're just stories, it is not truth. And I feel so passionate about encouraging people not only to feel self-connected and aware of themselves and who they are and stand in their power, but
Yeah.
also, and that's the seed, that's the foundation of how you step into making that abundant, beautiful, juicy,
Yeah.
favorite kind of reality that's yours, you know?
Yeah. And I
And
think
so,
realizing that our wounds are actually what we perceive to be our wounds. They're
yes.
not really wounds, but what we perceive to be our wounds are not only gold for us, but then it's gold that we get to give to other people too.
Mm,
And we get to
mm,
start interacting with it that way.
yeah.
And thank you for sharing that part because that is so, so, so beautiful and a beautiful perspective to have on this experience and this journey that you've had. And I think I could speak on behalf of myself and everyone else listening to this that we're so excited to see where you get to continue to go with this and the abundance you get to receive and create and then share that gift with everyone else in that journey. And
Mm,
that's really exciting.
yeah.
So I'm gonna just allow you to give some final words, some endings, and then we can close this out. Any final
Yeah.
messages for anyone who is listening to your journey right now?
Well, thank you for listening. If you're still here, you're listening to. I've never told my full story like that before from, the perspective that I think of it often about.
Mm-hmm.
And, this isn't like a finished story, because we're constantly evolving. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the more that we allow ourselves to evolve, we allow ourselves to pivot, to, you know, shift. This is like we're just constantly meeting that reality that we want to live more,
Yeah.
And so I think we have to allow ourselves in
Yeah.
those spaces. Allow yourself to listen to yourself and go on that journey. Those things that you're called to, there's a reason, You've got to trust
Go
it.
for them. Yeah.
100%. Thank
Well,
you for listening.
thank you for
This
sharing.
was
I learned so much more about you when we were even talking about this episode and your journey. So it was honestly, it was amazing for me to even hear other details that I didn't even know about. So
fun.
thank you for sharing so vulnerably and sharing with a message and sharing with purpose and sharing with intention. I think you've done such a beautiful job of taking your journey and turning it into a beautiful foundation for yourself and then sharing that with other people so they can receive all of
Mm.
the gold that you've received from your life as well. So I love you. Thank you for
Mm.
today.
I love you.
And
Thank you for
you
holding
guys,
space so beautifully.
absolutely. I'm so
Mm.
grateful that I can. And you guys get to come back next week and then you'll hear my story and my
Oh my God.
journey. Very different than Abby's, but the theme, really, when I think of it, the theme is the same. But yeah,
Mm.
thank you guys for
I
being
love
here
it.
today.
Thank you guys so much.